Good clinical practice. Definition. Good clinical practice is an internationally recognized set of detailed ethical and scientific quality requirements. Ethical and scientific, both are really important, for designing, conducting, performing, monitoring, auditing, recording, analyzing, and reporting clinical trials. Ensuring that rights, safety, and well-being of subjects are protected. Subjects are humans which participate in clinical trials. Clinical trial, by definition, is a trial involving human subjects. And that the data generated are reliable and robust. So, two key tasks: ensure rights, safety, and well-being of subjects, participants of clinical trials, and also reliability and robustness of data. What were milestones in the development of good clinical practice? Here they are. There was no specific legislation of medicinal products in the beginning of 20th century, even 100 years ago. However, developments required such a legislation. Then people learned that medicinal products carry not only benefits but also risks. During Second World War, Nazis carried out experiments on people with disability and prisoners of the war. Further, later experiments were investigated and the doctors prosecuted in Nuremberg trials. Later on, Nuremberg Code was adopted. Nuremberg Code served as predecessor of good clinical practice. In 1961, rare birth defect phocomelia reached epidemic proportions in Europe. Thousands and thousands of newborns had this congenital abnormality. But United States of America had no such increase. What happened? And here you see pictures of children with this birth defect. Phocomelia means abnormal development of arms and legs, while amelia means total absence of arms and legs. Surprisingly, there was no increase in congenital abnormalities in the United States of America. Why? What was the reason? In a scientific congress, one scientist came to another one with a question. I have a child with phocomelia, and I also know that you have a child with phocomelia as well. May I ask you a confidential question? Did your wife take thalidomide during pregnancy? The answer was yes. This discussion gave rise of hypothesis that the reason of this epidemics of congenital abnormalities was hypnotic medicinal product thalidomide. So why USA had no increase in congenital abnormalities? This is the reason. Francis Kelsey rented by Food and Drug Administration not long ago. Food and Drug Administration is governmental body responsible for marketing authorization of medicinal products. So she was responsible for the review of the application for marketing authorization of thalidomide. She refused. She refused because of concerns about the lack of evidence regarding the safety. She applied unusually high requirements. There was no standardization at that time. And later on, she showed strength and courage by refusing to bend to pressure from drug company officials. Europe learned the lesson. In 1965, European Council adopted Directive 6565 EEC. EEC means European Economic Communities. This directive required an application for a marketing authorization to be accompanied by quality data, preclinical data, and clinical data. So this is the same as we have right now. Of course, currently the requirements are much more detailed. It is still important to note that only at that time, since that time, Europe has a requirement for preclinical testing. So, to start studies on humans, preclinical safety tests should be available. Unfortunately, it seems that Europe, as well as all developed world, is in position currently to forget this lesson. In 1964, the World Medical Association adopted so-called Declaration of Helsinki. It is a declaration on ethical principles for medical research involving patients, so human beings. So, Declaration of Helsinki became second step in the development of current good clinical practice. In 2014, European Parliament and Council adopted the regulation on good clinical practice. As you see on the slide, general principle remained the same. Rights, safety, dignity, and well-being of subjects must be protected and prevail over all other interests. In addition, a clinical trial should be designed in the way which enables generation of reliable and robust data. Regulations is part of legislation of EU which are directly applicable, on the contrary to directives which should be transposed to the national legislation. Once again, two key principles to ensure generation of reliable and robust data, which is mainly used for marketing authorization to place a medicinal product on the market for use by everybody who needs. But this should be done with protection of subjects of clinical trials. Key document of a clinical study is a protocol. By the way, a clinical study is a broader term, including not only clinical trials, but also some studies which do not involve investigation of any anything new, such as new medicinal product or new therapeutic indication or new dosage, etc. Let's say we have just observation of medicinal products that are already authorized. We make some surveillance, generate some data, but we do not change anything in current clinical practice. So it is a clinical study, but it is not clinical trial. So protocol is a document that describes the objectives, design, methodology, statistical considerations, and organization of a clinical trial. And here we have key principles of the good clinical practice. They are largely abbreviated. These slides do not contain everything, but still most important points appear here. And finally, key principle of good clinical practice appears even in the Constitution of the Republic of Lithuania. No person shall be subjected to scientific or medical experimentation without his knowledge and free consent. So, rules are in place. It is necessary just to follow them. And in the final slide, we got a question if America needs a much better FDA. This article was published on 2nd September 2021. It reminds the history of thalidomide, and Andrew Cologney, a researcher at Brandeis University, says that we have seen since 1990 is a FDA that has been putting industry interests consistently ahead of public health. Let's leave this question as rhetoric.